Hello, you're watching ITU Telecom TV at Cairo in Egypt at ITU Telecom Africa 2008. I'm Martyn Warwick and I'm talking with Andrea Sacks, who's just been awarded the ITU's Laureate. Andrea Sacks, welcome. You've just won this Laureate. What's it for?
Well, I think it's from pestering engineers to put accessibility in their standards and generally promoting accessibility throughout the ITU. I've been doing it for a really long time, since 1991.
When you say accessibility, what do you mean by that?
Well, accessibility in terms of for persons with disability, it means that new technology includes old technology that people who are disabled already use. It means when you design new technology that you design it with people who are disabled or elderly in mind. It means not only accessibility in the terms of the technical aspect, but also in the terms of the user. The user has a different concept perhaps in how to use the device or how he's hindered by using a device or a service. So you need to take a lot of user input into consideration. And if you design something universally applicable to all people, you get a very good product or a very good service anyway. So it's changing the consciousness of people who are engineers, or people who are CEOs who look at the money instead of the actual service or product. It means, there's a wonderful expression the deaf came up with, and that was where my background was. It's nothing about us without us. So in other words, it's including humanity rather than doing it for profit or ease of use in terms of economic structure.
Of course, throughout history and in different parts of the world, the disabled are treated in different ways. Very often they're discounted and ignored altogether, and very often they're regarded as being a burden on families and upon the state. Surely if you provide them with the technology to enable them to use their own intellectual ability to have input to society, you take that burden off the state. Is that part of what you're trying to do?
Yes, I think that's a simple answer to that, absolutely. They have this wonderful expression, which I'm taking from another organization. If you give a man a fish, he'll feed himself. If you give a man tools, he will grow food and take care, or a net, and he will fish. The same thing applies to people who have perfectly good intelligence, perfectly good abilities to do things. Even people with learning disabilities have something to contribute. I have a mild form of dyslexia, and without a computer, I would be totally lost. So I'm an example of that as well. I can't spell to save my soul.
We're here at the ITU show and you're working with ITU-D development. What are you doing with them?
Well, I've only been working with them for about a year at the request of the permanent Syrian representative. And they formed a question on accessibility, question 20 of study group 1. And where I was working was mainly with the technical aspect, in other words, working with engineers, whereas they are working in another area where they're working on the actual getting anything available, anything that they can use. It's not just, mine's more of a refinement, and they just, for instance, want broadband. You can't have an accessible website to a blind reading device if you don't have the right broadband to have the kind of website that can be used in the first place. So they're two different concepts, and what we do is try to exchange information, and we also try and make both sides aware of each other. What's gone on in the ITU-T telecommunication sector, which also is taking in ICTs, and what's going on in the D sector, and what the problems are really, what the problems really are. They're different, but they are certainly related.
I'm glad you mentioned broadband because, again, as we've been saying, we are here in Africa, and one of the great problems for Africa is the lack of access to broadband. As far as in terms of accessibility, that's one kind of accessibility. The other kind, which is applicable to the disabled, surely under those circumstances would be a secondary matter. Do you think that's the case?
I think in the beginning I was mainly involved in working with persons with disabilities, and my head's been exploded into now absorbing all of it. We're now even talking about children in Childline and how they can access the internet. You can be disabled because you cannot access anything. You can be disabled because you're a child and you cannot read. And yet that wouldn't be normally considered a disability in comparison to somebody who's a paraplegic or deaf or blind. If you cannot access, you are at a disadvantage, and that is a disability. It's the access, the bad access, that causes the problem, not the disability.
Andrea Sacks, congratulations again, and thank you very much.
Thank you also.